Hey, what's up? Todd here, and today I'm bringing you the Technical Game Manifesto. So first, I'm going to explain to you what I think technical game is, why it's important, and what technical game has meant to me throughout my career as a pickup artist and a pickup instructor. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of break down the technical elements of game from start to finish, all the way from open to close. What are the different sort of very rigorous technical elements? We're going to try and keep the emotions aside and look at game as a purely functional doctrine, as a purely functional, like, do this, do that, do the right thing, don't do the wrong thing, take action. Not worry about where the actions are coming from so much, but just purely what is perfect game from a technical perspective every step of the way. Okay, so that's what we're going to kind of do. So for my first 3 years in game, I was going out, I was doing day game. I was actually too young to go out. And most of the advice that I would get, there wasn't a lot of good pickup forums out there, and there weren't really good pickup companies teaching anything. So most of what I had was bad conventional wisdom. It was sort of like old wives' tales or generalized like Hollywood ideology for what works, which as we know today mostly doesn't work. So I had a lot of bad advice. And what I was mostly doing was like banging my head against a wall and going by trial and error. If something worked, I would try and repeat it over and over again. But what I didn't understand is sometimes what works in one context doesn't work in another context. And so I was really kind of feeling around in the dark, like misguided, not knowing what's going on. And about 3 years into my progression in game, I got on some forums where Tyler was posting at the time, where Mystery was posting, and they had a much more technical style of game. They had this, the format at the time was FMAC, Find Meet, Attract, Close. But there were specific elements and specific ideas of what attraction is, what emotions you're trying to trigger in a girl, the idea that an interaction should follow progression. It's not just you do one thing over and over again, and it's that one characteristic as being an attractive man. They had this understanding that there is this idea of opening, and then once you've gotten past that phase, your behavior changes a little bit through hooking, your behavior changes a little bit through building comfort, etc. So this was a huge revelation for me, because now all these different things that had worked in different contexts, now I was able to put them in the correct context. I could do the things that made sense in the opening phase only, and then leave them out in maybe like the comfort phase. And so this was a quantum leap in my game, both in terms of execution, but also more importantly, in terms of diagnosis. In terms of after I did a set, after I had talked to a girl and it didn't go well, I could go back to the drawing board and say, oh, what did I do wrong? Did I mess up because of this? Did I mess up because of this? And having models in my head actually made a tremendous difference, because I had something to evaluate against. So throughout this video, I'm gonna talk to you not about the why, but about the how. There's a lot of why in the product. There's a lot of why in my other videos. I could go into the why, which is evolutionary psychology, general psychology, the truth of the human experience in the 21st century, different things like that. But what I want you to look at this as right now is this. I want you to look at this as the result of an experiment, or actually a series of experiments I've been doing for the past 15 years. Basically, I tried certain things, they worked. I tried other things, they didn't work. And I'm just gonna give you the results of those experiments. I'm not gonna give you the explanation. I'm just gonna give you an exact ABCD roadmap of what to do. Okay, for the why, refer to the rest of the product or to my other video. Quick caution, whenever I teach you highly technical things, I wanna give you a word of advice. And that is, the map is not the territory, the menu is not the meal, okay? This is a lesson from the field of semantics, which is basically the study of how language affects our thought. The idea is we have a lot of mental models, a lot of words we use to mean something, but understand the words are a model, the model in our head is just a model, it's not an exact representation of the real world. And so whenever the model conflicts with the real world, or whenever you have different models telling you different things, kind of forget the models or understand the limitation of the models. Understand the model is not the reality, okay? Because the danger with a really technical style of game, or with having these sort of like mental models, is that people start to treat them as black and white, and they lack flexibility in their use, okay? A good example I gave to a really smart student of mine who was having trouble managing multiple models. He was a doctor, actually, so he knew science very well. And so what I told him is this. It's like on a very, very small scale, what matters is like molecular force, like the forces between atoms, and that's what hold things together. On a big scale, like planets, it's all about gravity. And so then I asked him, what's the most powerful force in the universe? And the answer is, it depends, right? It depends if you're looking at a big scale or a small scale. Similarly, if you say, is game about like building a lot of value, or is game about really connecting with a girl? Well, it depends. Early on in the interaction, in a cold approach, it might be about building a lot of value because she's not ready to connect with you yet. But in a social circle game, or in a situation where you already have value for whatever reason, it's all about building comfort. So there is no black or white, okay? It depends is something you need to become very, very okay with. So I'm gonna teach you a lot of these things as though they are very absolute, but I want you, as I'm teaching them to you, to keep in mind that they are not absolute. It's all gray area, and the phrase "it depends" is paramount through understanding all of this. Okay, so the model that I use as a technical model, and the model that we've kind of used for a long time in RSD, basically is what we used to call 5-point escalation, which is open, hook, emotional connection, physical connection, close. Right? That's a general progression for how an interaction will go from a cold approach. Okay? And that's from a cold approach only. If you're in a warm approach situation, a social circle situation, a lot of those open and hook things can go away. And this actually messes a lot of people up, because a lot of people, when they learn cold approach, they treat everything as cold approach, and they go interact with their friends or their families, and they're interacting with someone who they should know and should have like a lot of trust and respect built up with, and they go open them, or they go like throw a nig to build value on like their like second cousin or something like that. It's fucking weird, all right? It doesn't make any sense, and it's divorced from reality, because what they're doing is they're blindly following this model that they have to open, hook, emotional connection, physical connection, close, when the fact of the matter is a lot of those things are already taken care of by the situation. So you always want to know where you're at. You always want to know what the model is meant to do and what it's not meant to do, but the model is still useful. Okay, so let's look at all of these different elements very, very quickly. On the open, there are basically a few things you need to worry about on the open always. First is eye contact. Maintain good eye contact. Don't stare, don't keep it like forcefully. Maintain good eye contact and kind of have a thought in your head of something positive, because you want your vibe to be good. Secondly, vocal volume. You need to be loud enough to be heard. Now, this is going to vary from one scenario to another. Obviously, you have to be less loud in like a quiet cafe than in a loud nightclub, but whatever the scenario, you must be loud enough to be heard. Next, tonality. You need to have a breaking rapport tonality, okay? You need to have that sort of like your voice hits a little bit, the same way you would talk if you were a superior officer in the Army to a lower ranking officer, or if you were a boss talking to an employee. All right, where there is an authority, or a teacher talking to a student is another way to look at it, okay? So breaking rapport tonality. These are all going to convey high value right away, and that's going to be true on almost every open. Things to consider on the open. Should you go direct or indirect, i.e. should you show intent on the open or just start with general conversation? Well, the decision here is going to be based on how easy or hard the set is to open. If the set's very easy to open, I would recommend going direct. If the set's more difficult to open, I would recommend going indirect and letting the girl sample your personality a little bit more before going direct. Okay, that's going to give you the greatest possibility of opening the set correctly. Lastly, on the open, my suggestion is no matter what, plan on speaking for at least 20 seconds. Now, if the girl happens to jump in and carry the conversation for you, great, but most of the time you're going to need to carry the conversation for at least 20 seconds. Doesn't matter much what you say, but it matters that you keep rambling with confidence. If you do all these behaviors, you probably are going to open very, very, very well. However, the open only gets you so far. The open will only get you started in the interaction. From there, you're going to need to start conveying your value. You're going to need to start creating a plot line. You're going to start moving things forward with the girl. And that's where the hook phase of that 5-point escalation model begins. Now, the hook phase basically means getting the girl to want to talk to you more than she wants you to leave. Or on a deeper level, and this is the way I like to look at the hook, it means getting the girl willing to do work to talk to you. And that's very key, willing to do work, because the key thing that means is you need to allow her to do work. Okay, so that means by its nature, in the hook phase, you have to leave silences. There are times when you have to be quiet and you have to let her talk. In fact, you should look at the early phase of the interaction as getting her to talk being your main outcome. Once the girl starts talking, telling stories, asking me questions, literally in set, I just go, my work is done here. Okay, not literally, but emotionally that's what I'm doing, is I'm just taking a deep breath and thinking the hard work is done. Now she's gaming me, now she's chasing. But if you're continuously talking and continuously pushing forward, it's impossible for that to happen. Okay, so understand that as soon as you possibly can, you want to leave a silence that she will fill. The question is, how do you leave a silence that she will fill? And the answer to that is value. Now here are some techniques you can use to create value. Number one, stories that convey high value, okay? First of all, stories in and of themselves, the fact that you're telling a story conveys high value because you are speaking, because you're leading, because you're the center of attention. But better yet, if you tell stories about attractive qualities. Basically, if you want to convey attractive qualities in a story, you want to convey one of the following characteristics: attractiveness, attentiveness, assertiveness, assurativeness, and aliveness. Attractiveness basically means that you take care of yourself and are doing positive things in your life. Attentiveness basically means that you are caring towards others and will provide a good experience toward those around you. Assertiveness means you will stand up for yourself and you won't get walked all over. Assuredness means you have just a general confidence about what you do and you're not questioning yourself all the time. And aliveness means you're willing to put yourself out there and take risks. If you're conveying any of those qualities in your story, it's inherently going to convey more value than if you're not. Lastly, if you're conveying social proof or positive social feedback in your story, i.e. if you tell stories about times when you had lots of friends around you, girlfriends, those kind of things, that's going to be very positive in terms of conveying value. Now, with any of those, you need to make sure that whatever attribute you're trying to convey comes up as a natural outgrowth of the story rather than being try-hard. If it comes off as being try-hard, you will be bragging, and that will undermine anything you're trying to convey. Okay, so storytelling, and especially storytelling with what we call DHV, demonstration of higher value, is a very powerful tool. Next tool is flirtation. And flirtation, basically the best example that I can give that kind of scopes everything is the push-pull. Push-pull basically is giving a compliment and insult in the same sentence or in the same few sentences. For example, I really like that shirt, but you're kind of trying hard. You didn't have to dress up so much. Right? So it's a positive, I like that shirt. With the negative, you didn't have to try so hard. Or like, what the fuck are you doing? I love it. Right? What the fuck are you doing as a negative? I love it as a positive. So that negative positive or positive negative that gives that emotional roller coaster is a very, very good way to start to get on someone's radar and convey yourself as either value or threat. Okay? Because it's about them. Anything that's about a person is going to be either of value to them or of threat to them. Right? And that's what's going to put you on their radar. That's what's going to get their attention. Right? And in order to, when you leave that silence, have them chase, you have to have their attention. Right? Now, the reason we do a push-pull rather than just an insult is if you insult someone, they're very likely to resist it. Right? But if you push-pull, because there's a positive with it and they want to accept the positive, they're more willing to also accept the negative, especially if it's good-humored or the overall vibe is more positive than negative. So that's the power of the push-pull. A similar structure to a push-pull is actually what we call a mini cold read. And that's a statement of the form, you're so X, it's just like Y. And there it could be like, you're so cute, you're like my little sister. And notice how that had a push-pull in it. You're so cute as a positive, you're like my little sister is desexualizing, so it's kind of a negative, right? Or be like, you're so colorful, you're like a little penguin, which by the way doesn't even make sense, but it definitely makes them, in their head, it makes them think like, is this positive, is this negative, how do I react to it? So it's just a cute, fun little phrase that is geared towards, again, putting them in their head, making them think about themselves. And any of these sorts of things, what are you doing? You're conveying that your presence in their life is either value or threat. A final attraction tactic that you can use is either the disqualifier or the takeaway. Disqualifiers where we say, you and I wouldn't get along because of this, or oh my God, I can't believe you said that, we're done, or you're not my type, those kind of things. Takeaway is where you actually walk away or turn your back on them. But all of these have the same nature, and that is that you're conveying that you don't need them and you're dismissive of them. And humans don't like that. Human beings evolved in tribes, and in a tribal setting, being shunned by the tribe or even shunned by a member of the tribe is very, very bad for your long-term survival prospects. So when you shun or dismiss people, they're very naturally going to react by chasing you and trying to get your approval back. And again, remember, in this hook phase, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get them to chase. So this is a very, very effective tactic. How do you know you have the hook? Well, here's a few indicators. One is, if you leave silence, does she fill the silence? If that's the case, you probably have the hook. Next test. If you try to escalate physically in some way, does she go along with it or does she resist? If she goes along with it, it's likely you have a hook of some kind. Next, if you try to escalate logistically in some way, you try and move her somewhere and she goes along with it, you probably have the hook. Lastly, if you're escalating the conversation verbally and she's probably in this case not just going along with it, but participating and adding to it, then you're probably in good shape in terms of having the hook. Understand though, the hook is sort of a general term for a large sort of quantity of engagement that you can have. So what I mean by that is you can have the girl hooked enough to talk to you, but not hooked enough to kiss you. Hooked enough to kiss you, not hooked enough to sleep with you. So I want you to look at the hook as hooked enough for X, hooked enough for some behavior. And hooked enough for one behavior does not mean hooked enough for a behavior that requires a little more commitment. So think of the hook not as something that you get once in the set, but something you get over and over again, deeper and deeper as the set progresses, and it'll be the same general tactics for getting the hook that will exist throughout. However, the longer you go in the set, the more you're going to mix those hooking tactics in with comfort building, connection building, getting to know you tactics, which is what we'll talk about next. The next stage, once you have the hook, is the emotional connection and then the physical connection. And these are discrete stages the way I've modeled it, but I want you to understand that these should be going together. You shouldn't be getting an extremely deep emotional connection with no physical connection, or a lot of physical connection with no emotional connection. So they should be going together, but if in doubt, lean towards emotional before physical, which is why they're ordered that way. So what builds emotional connection? Well, very simply, emotional connection is fairly synonymous with comfort. The thing about comfort is this: try and define it. You can't really. You can say like synonyms, you can say things like comfort is trust, or comfort is feeling safe, things like that. You can give synonyms, or the way you can really define it is you can define what it's not, and what it's not is discomfort. The way I look at it is this: you know what, if you go to the gym and you get a sore muscle, you know what that feels like. But what does a not sore muscle feel like? Exactly, it feels like nothing. That's what comfort feels like. It feels like nothing. Okay, so what builds comfort is having more time of nothing, i.e. more time without discomfort. Okay, so the biggest builder of comfort is time. If you spend time with someone, you are going to be building comfort with them, as long as that time is spent without discomfort. If you spend time with someone creating discomfort, you're just building more discomfort. Okay, so time without discomfort equals comfort. That's why a lot of times it takes time to take a girl home. You can have a girl really into you, all over you, loving you within the first few minutes of the interaction, but it still might take 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, or even longer to take her home because you need that time to build comfort. All right. However, there are a lot of things you can do to sort of make time pass faster in set. By that, I don't mean literally make it pass faster. I mean, it makes your time count for more so that you can get more comfort in less time. Here are some suggestions. 1, move the girl around a lot. The more you move the girl around, the more she sort of like subconsciously has seen herself with you in a bunch of different places. And she's not really thinking about the clock time that's passed, but is thinking about, I've been with him here, 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 here. And it makes it subjectively feel much longer to her. So it makes that comfort build much faster. Next, similarities. The more things you have in common with a girl or show you have in common with a girl, the more she's going to relate you to other people she's known before and been comfortable with. For example, I played soccer for most of my life. So if I find out that a girl played soccer, I'm automatically equating her to all the girls I've known before that have played soccer, and even all the guys I've known before that have played soccer, a lot of whom have been my very close friends and companions. So automatically she's in kind of a club of people I've liked before. It makes me feel more comfortable and feel as though I know her better than I probably actually do. You can do the same thing with girls. Next is wide and deep rapport. Wide and deep rapport are two different modes of communication that are very useful in an interaction. Wide rapport means talking on a variety of different topics with someone. For example, if you've talked with someone about like sports and baseball and art and politics and traffic and the weather, you've talked about a lot of different topics. And by virtue of the fact that there have been a lot of topics, they could feel relatively comfortable that if they were to talk with you, nobody's going to run out of things to say, the conversation's not going to be dull or boring, it's not going to go dead, right? That there is going to be something to say, something to talk about. And so that's very good in terms of building comfort. However, it's not the greatest because you haven't really gone deep on any of those topics, so it's all kind of a superficial level of comfort. Deep rapport, on the other hand, is where you go deep on one particular topic. And that's really great for building a connection for the same reason that similarity builds a connection, right? You're showing that you have a deep similarity on a topic, or you've created, even if you didn't have one before, the fact that you've had this deep conversation with someone, that's creating a similarity in that exact moment with them. So that creates a very deep connection. The problem with that one is that it's very likely to categorize you as that guy. For example, if you have a great deep conversation about scuba diving with someone that lasts for hours and hours, then if you want to go hang out with them another time, they're like, oh, do I want to hang out and have another conversation about scuba diving? They're likely to think you're one-dimensional and can only talk about that one deep topic. So if they're not in the mood for that particular deep conversation, they may not want to see you. So the correct mix actually is a combination of wide and deep rapport, and that's where you're going to get the best sort of connection where people won't flake on you and will want to see you and keep seeing you over and over again. Another huge part of emotional connection is qualification. Qualification basically means allowing the girl to win you over, or another way of looking at it is finding reasons why this girl is special and different. Finding reasons why you like this girl for other than just the obvious. And this is very critical for a few reasons. Number one, if you qualify a girl, you're showing that you are a selective man. You're showing that you're a man with options, and this is highly, highly attractive. So the very process of qualifying is very value building for you, and it just puts you in a better light in the girl's eyes. However, the other thing that's great about qualification is if the girl feels like she won you over, if she did work for you and won you over, then if and when she sleeps with you, instead of feeling like it's something you did to her or you manipulated her into sex, what she's going to feel like is she won you over. She got you to sleep with her instead of you got her to sleep with you. And that fundamental shift in the frame is absolutely critical. It changes everything. It'll mean you'll get less resistance. It'll mean the girl will chase you harder. It means the girl will have a better experience overall. It means the girl will tell better things to her friends, have a different narrative in her head. It goes so far. So qualification, getting the girl to qualify to you, is absolutely critical. And there are two ways to make the qualification happen. One is organic, which is if you're just talking on various subjects and she says things you like, then you say, oh my God, that's so cool that you da-da-da-da, and give her credit for the good things she said. Similarly, you can disqualify occasionally, right? If she says something that you don't like, wow, did you really say that? Don't ever say that again. And what you actually want to do is a mix of the two, where you're qualifying some, disqualifying some, but on the whole, qualifying more than you're disqualifying. Okay, so that's the mix you want to have. If organic qualifying isn't happening, you can use forced qualification, and this is where you overtly ask qualifying questions. And this can be as simple as, are you adventurous, do you cook, stuff like that. But better yet is if you have particular characteristics you actually care about in a girl, it's better to qualify on those. So if you really like athletic girls, qualify on that. If you like smart girls, qualify on that. If you like dumb girls, qualify on that. Whatever it is that you like, use that as your qualifier because it's going to be more genuine, therefore more effective. It's also going to help you screen out the girls you're really into as opposed to the ones that aren't such a good fit for you and won't get along with you in the long run. So that brings us to physical escalation. And key thing to remember, I mentioned it again, but I'm going to re-mention it, which is that emotional connection and physical connection go hand in hand. Okay? So you shouldn't be doing all the emotional connection before you start the physical connection. It needs to start. Also a thing to notice, I didn't say physical escalation, I said physical connection. That's a key distinction. Now, we will talk about physical escalation, I'll do that right now, but understand that distinction, I'm going to come back to it in a second. Physical escalation basically is doing things physically with a girl that get you closer and closer to sex or closer and closer to more arousing behaviors. And the key philosophy here is the philosophy 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The idea being escalate a little bit, escalate a little further, and then pull away. Escalate a little further, and pull away. And especially if you get some kind of resistance, you definitely want to pull away. But actually, in reality, it's good to pull away before you're getting resistance. If you're only pulling away on resistance, you'll appear to be the pushy guy. If you're pulling away before you get resistance, you'll appear that you're just having fun, it's natural, it's smooth, you're not in a hurry, you're non-needy, etc. So it's actually much, much better to generally pull away before there's actually resistance. In fact, what I try and do, sort of in my head percentage-wise, is if 100% is what I could get away with physically, I try and go up to about 80%, 80, 85%, and pull back. And then I'll go up to we'll have a little more comfort. The bounds of what I could get away with physically moves a little further out, and then I'll go to 80, 85% of that, which is now past what 100% would have been a little while ago, but it's 80 to 85%. And by never going quite to 100, I don't risk the no, but I keep pushing the barrier, I keep pushing that frontier upward. And funny enough, by going to 80 or 85% and not hearing no, you'll actually escalate a lot faster overall than if you're constantly pushing that barrier and hearing a lot of no's. Because every time you hear no, that puts up a very strong wall, and that's going to make the whole thing slow down considerably. All right, so 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Obviously, if you're getting resistance, pull back, but actually what you want to do is pull back before you get resistance whenever possible, okay? Now, how about this distinction of physical connection as opposed to physical escalation? Well, the idea here is that everything you do physically should have meaning behind it. You should not be escalating in a way like you're just ticking boxes. It shouldn't be like, first hold hands, then grab shoulder, then hug, then kiss, then finger, right? You shouldn't be like that. If you're doing it that way, you're going to come off very robotic, very mechanical, and also if things ever don't go according to plan, you're going to really have no backup plan, and you're going to be kind of lost. What you want to be doing is thinking about the meaning. So here's a good idea to keep in your head. If I had a choice between 2 interactions, one is I'm making out heavily with the girl, but I'm always pressing the make out and she's always pulling away, or all I've done is hold hands with the girl, but every time I drop my hand, she grabs my hand back, so she's the one initiating the contact and she's the one chasing. I would prefer to have the hand holding where she's chasing than the making out where I'm chasing. Okay, so it's not about the physicality per se, it's about the meaning behind the physicality. And this is why I'll do a lot of moves. First of all, the 2 steps forward, 1 step back is great for this, because when you pull away, when there wasn't resistance, a lot of times she's thinking, why did he pull away? Did I do something wrong? Why is he so non-needy? This guy's so cool, that kind of stuff. So it's creating a better vibe and a better attitude about all of it. So earlier I mentioned the distinction between physical escalation and physical connection. And this is very critical because for me, I care a lot more about the meaning of the physicality than I do how much physicality you got. So you shouldn't be looking at physicality as a series of check boxes. So like first I hold hands, then I kiss, then I finger her, then I have sex with her, and you're just looking to tick boxes. What you should look at instead is what is the nature of the communication underlying the physicality. So if I had a choice between making out hard with a girl, but I'm always pressing forward and she's pulling away, or we're only holding hands and she's always chasing me and re-grabbing my hand, I would choose to just hold hands, okay? Because the meaning there is much different. The other reason why physical connections to physical escalation is important is to realize what is the optimal move, what is the highest move. Well, aside from sex, which is very active and is escalating, the best physical move for me is what I call sort of like, we used to call it body rocking rapport. I look at it sort of as just cuddling and talking, okay? Basically having casual physical contact that just seems natural and comfortable for everyone while you're going about the conversation. And that's key as well. The physicality shouldn't be an overt part of the conversation. It shouldn't feel clunky. It shouldn't feel like something's happening. It should feel like a smooth, natural progression that's going on. A great mentor of mine in game once said about physicality, like if a girl ever mentioned it, he'd say, "This is subtext, we don't talk about that," which is ridiculous that you should even say that in the set, but that is the way you should think about it. The way you should think about it is, this is subtext, we don't talk about it. It's not made a big deal of, it's just a natural part of the progression that's happening. So even though I just told you that you shouldn't look at physicality just as a series of checkboxes, I am actually going to give you what we call a physical stack. And this is a series of physical moves that go kind of from least invasive to most invasive. And the reason for this is to practice physicality. If you're not very comfortable getting physical, a good way to do it is to do these moves in order of most comfortable to least comfortable. So a good stack might be something like, first, high five. Next, handshake spin, which is basically grab the girl's hand and spin her like you would on it as a dance move. Next would be hand clasp, which is like you're clasping hands with a girl, either one hand or two hands. Next would be spin hug or hug lift. Hug the girl and pick her up. Next would be waltz dance, and waltz dance is sort of like high school slow dance, just kind of moving back and forth, just being comfortable in each other's presence, but comfortable with close touch. Next would be neck bite or neck kiss, and then the last would be to actually kiss. And if during this stack, because you're trying to move through it and work through your own issues with physicality, if doing this stack you're having trouble getting the kiss, one little trick you could do would be to do the eyes closed kiss, which is like, hey, close your eyes, I want to show you something, and then just kiss her while her eyes are closed. And a lot of times, the girl will be okay with the kiss, even if she was giving you resistance, because you've made it not her fault. That's a big key to escalation, is making it not the girl's fault. If she feels at fault, if she feels like it's something you're doing to her, then she'll resist it. If she feels like it's natural progression, then she likely won't, which is why that whole this is subtext, we don't talk about it thing is so, so, so important. Finally, that brings us to the close. And basically for the close, I have a 4-step model for exactly how to close in the most efficient way. And that model is seed, frame, qualify, lead. Okay, do those 4 steps and you'll be closing very, very effectively. Seed basically means close early, close often, close late. It means you want to start bringing up the ideas of the close, maybe even within the first minute or two of the interaction. Okay, you want to start throwing out different ideas of places you might go. Now, you don't throw them out in the idea that you might go there, but just start suggesting things you like to do and see if she latches onto them. See if they seem to work out. See if she throws up objections like, oh, I would, but I have plans, that kind of stuff. You can find those objections out, and that's very valuable. The earlier you find out the objections, the more time you have in the interaction to figure them out, okay? Aside from just seeding things you might do on the close, you want to seed the idea of closing, but again, in the negative. So instead of saying, maybe we'll do this thing later, you might be like, oh, you know what, it'd be fun to do this thing later, but actually, I don't know you that well, let's just slow down, let's take our time. So you disqualify or be like, you know, it's too bad you're not into this, because if you were, we could totally do this, but never mind. Right? So you're doing a lot of seeding, a lot of suggesting the close later, but you're doing it in the negative. Another form of seeding, by the way, that people categorize differently a lot of times is doing micro closes, i.e. moving the girl around within the same venue, or just getting her to comply to little things like coming to sit down with you. That's essentially closing for a little thing that makes closing for the big thing later easier. But again, close early, close often, close late. Next is frame. Frame is absolutely critical, and the frame has to be that sleeping with you is a win for her rather than a loss. And so to explain the right frame, I'm going to basically give you a phrase that you should just repeat over and over again. This is your phrase for closing. This is your phrase for all of game, and that is, we're going to go somewhere lovely that you will love. If you don't love it, then you can go home, and it doesn't really matter, because either way, I'm having a good time, and that's all that really matters, isn't it? Okay, so the idea there is we're doing something fun. There's no obligation on your part. It's totally like you're free to go at any time, no risk, and I'm going to have a good time, so I'm in it to have a good time, not to win at your expense. Okay, so you're framing it as a good experience and a win for her rather than a loss. The next thing is qualify, and this is another way of making it a win for her. Again, if she feels like she won you over, if you've made a deep emotional connection with her where she does feel a good amount of qualification, she's going to start to feel like she's winning by going home with you instead of you winning by taking her home. And that's absolutely critical. So you need to qualify hard throughout. And you might even, beyond just qualifying her as a person or qualifying her for if you like her, you can qualify her for if she's worthy of your clothes, i.e. we could go to this place, but I don't know, don't embarrass me. Or I don't know if you can handle yourself at this kind of place. It's kind of like an unusual environment. I don't know if you'd be able to fit in. She's like, no, I can totally fit in. She's qualifying for the clothes itself, which is also very, very powerful, okay? So you have seed, frame, qualify. And if you've done those three things well, then you should have a lot of sort of social capital, a lot of like ability to lead. So finally we have lead. If you seeded it, framed it, qualified her well, you've done the groundwork. Now leading should be very, very easy. If you haven't done your job well, then leading will be very, very hard. But assuming you've done that groundwork, what you want to do is lead strongly and lead in an entitled, assumptive way. So the key word here is SCO. It's not let's go, it's SCO. Because it's such a foregone conclusion she's coming with you that it's not even like worth mentioning in 2 words, okay? And what you want to do instead of just saying let's go and standing there and talking to her, you want to be SCO. And walking away right then and there, and then she's left with that awkward decision to follow you or not. And again, if she's committed to you, qualified to you, already into you, she's going to definitely feel that loss, and it's going to be very, very awkward for her not to go with you. You can even sometimes go SCO, take her hand, and lead her. Key thing is to be assumptive. You can always come back and deal with any objections as they come, but if you lead strongly, you're going to avoid a lot of those objections before they even happen. So that's a general view of all the things you're going to need to go through on a step-by-step basis in order to have it be successful. Now, every single set's going to be a little bit different. Obviously, there will be a lot of obstacles, hurdles, different scenarios thrown at you, but keep that general technical model in mind because those waypoints and those principles are going to remain true in virtually every single set. That said, as I mentioned before, don't be a slave to the model, okay? The girl and the interaction matter more than the model, and I want you to treat everything that I just said as guidelines rather than absolutes. Okay, for example, I've given you open, hook, emotional connection, physical connection, close. If you're at like a crazy party, like say a Burning Man, you may not need a whole lot of emotional connection. You can kind of drop that phase. So rather than being a slave and being like, no, we have to talk about our most innermost childhood like insecurities before having sex, just go fuck the girl already, okay? So don't be a slave to the model. Be smart. Be, adaptable, but take this as a general set of principles of what will work on a very consistent basis across the board in almost every situation. All right? Take it, use it, but don't use it stupidly. Take care.